My girlfriend cheated with my cousin. While I planned our future, so I moved out overnight and let them realize too late what they threw away. I'm a 27-year-old guy who genuinely believed I had finally found someone I could trust for the long term. Jenna wasn't just my girlfriend. She felt like the person I could finally build a future with, the one who would laugh at my dumb jokes, hold my hand through bad days, and sit beside me late at night, talking about the life we'd create together. We'd spent hours mapping out our plans, moving into a small apartment we'd decorate together, saving for a house with a yard for a dog, even debating what type of cat we'd adopt first. I was obsessed with making sure every step of our plan felt secure, so I covered the bills when I could, organized little surprises on our days off, and constantly reminded her she could rely on me. "Don't worry about a thing," I'd say, as she hesitated over rent. "I've got this." Her smile made every late shift, every skip night with friends, feel worth it. I trusted her completely, maybe too much. I believed she shared my values, my drive, my hopes. But subtle things started to creep in. She would brush off small commitments, cancel plans last minute, or nod along when I tried to talk about moving in together, only to seem distracted a few minutes later. Sometimes she'd sigh mid-conversation or check her phone in a way that made me feel like I lost her attention, even when she was physically there. I kept chalking it up to stress or work, telling myself it was normal for relationships to have ebbs and flows. Still, I noticed it. How her gaze drifted, how her voice softened when I brought up our future, how even the apartment we'd been looking at together suddenly didn't seem to excite her the way it should. The air felt a little heavier every time we sat down to plan. The rooms quieter, our laughter less frequent. I couldn't shake the sense that something was shifting beneath the surface, just out of my reach, and I had no idea how close that change was, or how devastating it would become. I'd thrown myself into the relationship like it was the most important job I'd ever had. Extra shifts became routine, not because I needed the money, but because I wanted Jenna to feel secure, to know that no matter what, I'd make our plans happen. I paid for most of our dates, handled groceries, even surprised her with little things she didn't ask for, but loved. Concert tickets, a cozy dinner on a random Wednesday, flowers when work had clearly drained her. "You're always so reliable," she'd say, her smile soft. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Hearing that, feeling her gratitude, made every sacrifice feel like a brick in the foundation of the life I imagined for us. Friends and family noticed too. They'd comment on how steady and supportive I was, how adult I had become, and I felt proud, like I'd finally earned the role of someone dependable, someone worth loving. But underneath the pride, subtle unease was creeping in. Late at night, her phone would buzz constantly, and sometimes she'd duck away to answer in another room. A weekend outing she couldn't explain clearly would turn into a vague, "just errands" text, and her tone felt clipped, almost evasive. I tried to shrug it off, telling myself everyone needed space, everyone had personal things to handle. "It's nothing," I'd mutter, forcing a smile when she came back into the room. "I trust you." Yet that knot in my chest didn't go away. Something about the way she moved, the slight hesitation in her laughter, the way she avoided eye contact when I mentioned future plans. It all felt off. Even as I convinced myself it was normal, I started noticing the little cracks in our perfect world, the things I had missed before, like tiny shadows at the edges of my carefully built life. And with each passing day, the weight of those shadows grew heavier, pressing closer to the truth I wasn't ready to face. It started small, almost imperceptible, but I noticed it immediately. Jenna began avoiding the conversations that used to excite me the most, the ones where we planned our future together. When I brought up moving in or saving for a house, she'd sigh, glance at her phone, or mumble something about being too busy. Plans we'd made weeks in advance suddenly vanished. Dinners, weekend trips, even simple movie nights, replaced with excuses about work, stress, or last-minute social obligations. I found myself apologizing to her, asking if I'd pressured her too much, even though all I wanted was to feel connected, to feel like we were still building the life we promised each other. Her affection, once warm and constant, had started to feel mechanical. Small gestures that used to make me smile, her hand brushing mine, a playful comment, a lingering kiss, were replaced by impatience or irritation whenever I tried to reach for closeness. "Can we just drop it?" she snapped one night when I gently reminded her about our weekend plans. I forced a smile, swallowing the lump in my throat, telling myself it was just a phase, that stress could make anyone distant. But then, Liam, my cousin, started showing up more often at gatherings, sometimes with Jenna in tow. He'd laugh at jokes I didn't understand, share looks with her that lingered too long, and make me feel invisible in moments that used to be ours. The subtle jealousy gnawed at me, a quiet alarm I tried to ignore. Something was shifting beneath the surface, something I couldn't quite put into words yet. The air felt heavier when they were together, the room smaller, and the easy comfort of our relationship seemed to slip further out of reach. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was a problem growing right in front of me, and that one day, I might finally see it for what it really was. The late night started. Small at first. She'd say she was catching up on work or running errands that couldn't wait. But then the pattern grew. Outings she couldn't fully explain. Texts that she'd hastily shut off when I entered the room. Phone calls she'd step outside to take. My gut kept screaming that something was off, but I pushed it down, telling myself I was overreacting, that suspicion without proof would only hurt us. Still, the unease crept in, thick and persistent, like smoke that won't dissipate no matter how hard you fan it. Then, there were the glances and the laughter, the kind you only share when nobody else is watching. Jenna and Liam would exchange subtle smirks, inside jokes I wasn't part of, touches on the arm that lingered slightly too long. It made my stomach twist, a bitter knot of jealousy and confusion I couldn't untangle. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they were just friends. Maybe I was imagining things. But the voice in my head wouldn't quiet down. I finally confided in my closest friend one night over a drink, my hands trembling slightly. "I feel like something's wrong," I admitted, lowering my voice. "I don't want to seem paranoid, but I can't shake this feeling." They gave me a hard look. "Trust that gut," they said. "You're not imagining it. Pay attention before it's too late." The real warning signs hit when I brought up moving in together again. Her demeanor shifted immediately, defensive, closed off, eyes darting away. "Do we have to talk about this right now?" she snapped, the warmth in her voice gone. That instant, the tension in the room became palpable, a charged silence that left my chest tight and my thoughts racing. Something was coming. I could feel it, a storm building quietly beneath the surface, and I had no idea just how much it would devastate me once it broke. I never imagined I'd discover it the way I did, accidentally, stumbling across messages that shattered everything I thought I knew. My phone buzzed with a notification from Jenna's account, a message she had left logged in while she stepped out, and when I saw it, my chest tightened instantly. Liam's name flashed across the screen, followed by words I couldn't believe. Intimate, secret, affectionate. My brain refused to process it at first, like some cruel trick, a hallucination I could wake up from. But the words didn't vanish, and the reality hit me like a punch to the gut. Shock, disbelief, and rage collided in a storm I couldn't escape. I replayed every memory in my head. Every late night she said she was at work. Every time he just happened to show up. Every smile and touch I thought meant love. The realization that the moments I treasured most were built on deceit made my stomach twist painfully. How could she betray me like this? How could my own cousin, someone I trusted implicitly, be the other half of this betrayal? It wasn't just a cheating partner. It was my family, involved, and that made it worse, personal, humiliating. I paced the room, hands gripping the edge of the table, my mind spinning. My apartment felt suddenly smaller, the air heavy and suffocating. I wanted to scream, to break something, to confront them both immediately. But another part of me froze. I couldn't yet decide how to handle it without making everything explode uncontrollably. The anger and hurt throbbed in my chest, each beat louder than the last, and I realized that nothing could ever be the same again. Everything I built, every trust I had placed, now felt like it had been torn away in an instant. And I knew that from this moment forward, nothing would be simple, nothing would be safe, and the fallout was about to begin. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the messages, heard the laughter, remembered the touches that were never meant for me. Anger, sadness, disbelief. They all collided in a relentless storm inside me. I began questioning my judgment, wondering if I'd been blind all along, too trusting, too naive to notice the signs screaming at me for weeks. Sleep became impossible. The ceiling above me blurred into darkness each night as my thoughts circled endlessly. I avoided seeing Jenna or Liam, pretending to be busy, pretending I could cope. But the truth was, I felt trapped in a toxic web of betrayal I couldn't escape. I tried calling her once, my hands trembling over my phone, but she evaded every attempt. "I'm busy," she'd murmur, voice clipped, almost indifferent. My chest tightened with every word, every excuse, and a part of me realized that the connection I'd cherished was already severed. I wanted confrontation. I wanted clarity. But instead I got silence, and the gnawing proof of her guilt. Family gatherings became torture. Every laugh they shared, every whispered joke between them, felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I sat quietly, trying to mask the turmoil, but the eyes of others noticed, the way I tensed, the way my jaw clenched. The room felt heavier with each passing minute. Every glance from them a reminder that my world had shifted irreversibly. The anger was almost unbearable, yet the sadness was suffocating. I felt broken, humiliated, and completely alone in my own family. And in that moment, as the weight of betrayal pressed down from every direction, I realized something crucial. I had reached rock bottom. The question now wasn't what had happened. It was what I was going to do next, and I didn't yet have the answer. I knew confronting them in anger would accomplish nothing. Screaming, pleading, or begging for an explanation felt like it would only feed their arrogance, and I didn't want to give them the satisfaction. Instead, I decided to take control quietly, to reclaim my life on my own terms. That night, I began organizing my things discreetly, pulling out clothes, packing essentials, and mentally mapping out the logistics of leaving. I searched for a new place, signing lease agreements and transferring funds, all while keeping up the illusion that nothing had changed. Every decision I made was deliberate, calculated, not out of spite, but out of necessity. As I packed, I replayed our history in my mind. Every sacrifice, every extra shift, every time I had bent over backward for her happiness. It all weighed heavily on me. The thought that they might realize, too late, what they were losing, gave me a strange mix of calm and anticipation. I could see it in my head, their faces when they finally understood that the person they'd hurt most wasn't going to wait around, wasn't going to beg for forgiveness. Meanwhile, subtle hints of their arrogance became more apparent. Jenna assumed I'd rationalize everything, that I'd wait for her to explain herself. Liam seemed to operate under the belief that I'd forgive, that family ties would bind me to their choices, regardless of how they had betrayed me. That made planning my exit feel like a quiet rebellion, a silent assertion of my independence. The apartment, once our shared space, now felt like a cage I had to escape from. Each item I packed, each box I labeled, was a step toward freedom and away from the pain they had caused. And as I stood in the dim light of our living room, suitcase open and decision made, I realized that the next 24 hours would change everything. For me and for them. That night, I packed the last of my essentials into the car, each item a symbol of a life I was leaving behind. I left a brief note, simple and factual. No anger, no accusations. Just enough to mark my departure. I didn't confront them, didn't shout or demand explanations. I slipped quietly out the door, leaving behind the house, the memories, the photos, and the life we'd built together. The silence of the apartment lingered after me, a stark contrast to the chaos I was about to leave behind. It was heartbreaking in its own way, but also strangely empowering. I was taking control where I had once felt powerless. The house held echoes of laughter, arguments, and late-night conversations that suddenly felt hollow. I paused for a moment at the threshold, breathing in the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the living room, the soft hum of the fridge, the familiar creak of the floorboards. Everything was frozen in time, a testament to the sacrifices I'd made, the trust I'd given, and the life I'd hoped we'd share. Yet I knew none of it would matter to them until it was too late. By morning, Jenna and Liam awoke to an empty apartment. Confusion, panic, and disbelief must have set in immediately. I could imagine her rushing to the bedroom, calling his name, expecting a response that would never come. They were left scrambling, voices raised in frustration, searching for answers that weren't coming. I didn't contact family, didn't explain myself. I let the silence do the work, knowing the gravity of what they'd lost would hit harder than any argument I could have had. Driving away, the night air crisp against my face, I felt a weight lift from my chest. I didn't look back, though every memory tugged at me, bittersweet and raw. And in that quiet distance, I knew the real consequences of betrayal were only just beginning to settle around them. Days passed, and the quiet I'd carved out remained unbroken. Jenna's messages flooded my phone at odd hours. Pleas, apologies, questions. But I ignored them all, letting the silence speak louder than any words I could write. Liam called too, leaving voice messages that rang hollow even through the phone speaker, his tone veering from confusion to desperation in seconds. Their panic, their growing frustration, was almost palpable through the screen, and for the first time, I felt a small, cold satisfaction that the weight of their actions was settling squarely on them. Meanwhile, friends and family began to notice the strain. Casual comments, subtle glances, the whispered concern at gatherings. They all added a layer of validation I hadn't dared hope for. People started asking if Jenna and I were okay, and for the first time, I didn't have to explain the betrayal. It was already visible in the way she avoided conversations and how Liam's charm seemed forced, strained. The consequences of their deception were unfolding naturally, and I didn't have to intervene. I scrolled through her text one morning, careful not to respond. Lines like, "I never meant for this to happen. Can we fix it?" And, "I don't know what I was thinking. Please call me," made my chest tighten, but there was no room for forgiveness anymore. Liam's excuses arrived next. "It wasn't like that, I swear. It just happened." Weak attempts to rewrite reality that only emphasized the gravity of what they'd done. The realization hit them slowly, painfully, like ice in the bloodstream. I stayed calm, detached, letting the tension grow with each passing day. And as I went about my new life, a quiet certainty settled in. They would understand too late exactly what they had thrown away, and by then, nothing could undo it. In the weeks that followed, I focused entirely on myself. I painted the walls of my new apartment a color I'd always wanted, rearranged furniture to my liking, and slowly filled the space with things that felt like me. My choices, my freedom, my life. Each morning I woke up without the suffocating tension of betrayal hanging over me, and every night I fell asleep, knowing I was building a world that belonged only to me. The memories of Jenna and Liam still stunk, sharp reminders of the trust I'd given and the lies I'd endured. But instead of crushing me, they became fuel. Fuel to set boundaries, to recognize my worth, and to ensure I would never be caught in a toxic spiral like that again. Their attempts to contact me continued, predictable and desperate. Texts, calls, even indirect messages through friends. They all failed. I ignored them intentionally, letting my calm detachment reinforce the consequences of their choices. Hearing their voices or reading their excuses might have once shattered me, but now it only reminded me of how far I'd come. I could feel a quiet strength growing in me, a sense of control I hadn't known existed while I was entangled in their deceit. I reflected on everything I'd invested, the time, the emotional labor, the hope I'd poured into a future that wasn't real, and I let myself mourn it privately, without them present to diminish my pain or manipulate my grief. With each reflection, I realized something powerful. I wasn't just surviving, I was reclaiming myself. Jenna and Liam had thought they could bend me to their whims, but in leaving, I'd flipped the script entirely. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace and certainty. And yet, even as I settled into this new life, a part of me wondered, how would they react when they finally understood the depth of what they had lost? And would it matter by then? I never confronted them directly, and I never needed to. Instead, I let my absence do all the work, letting the silence speak louder than any argument ever could. I threw myself into building a life that reflected everything I wanted, moving fully into my new apartment, decorating it with pieces that felt like me, and finally breathing in a space where I could make my own rules. At work, I threw myself into projects with renewed focus, impressing colleagues and earning praise I hadn't realized I craved. Slowly, the confidence I thought I'd lost began to return, a steady flame growing brighter with each small victory. Mutual friends began relaying news of my progress, subtly dropping updates into Jenna and Liam's ears. They heard about my promotion, the improvements I'd made in my apartment, the way I carried myself with quiet assurance. Each piece of information chipped away at the false sense of security they had assumed I would maintain. Finally, they began to grasp the depth of what they had thrown away: trust, love, respect. The foundation of a relationship they had assumed would bend around their deceit. Jenna sent a long, trembling message one night. "I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you like this. Can we talk?" My heart clenched at the words, but I felt no impulse to respond. Liam's calls came next, apologies spilling out, excuses trailing behind them like shadows of their guilt. But the damage was done. I had already moved on mentally, emotionally, and physically. The satisfaction wasn't in revenge for its own sake. It was in the quiet affirmation that I had survived, that I had reclaimed my power, and that the consequences of betrayal were now theirs to bear. For the first time, I felt the equilibrium restored. The weight of their actions finally reflected back onto them, without a single harsh word from me. And yet, as I stood on the balcony of my new apartment one evening, looking out at the city lights, I knew the final closure was still unfolding, just beyond reach. Looking back, I realized how much I learned from the whole ordeal. Trust is earned, not given freely, and betrayal often exposes the true character of those you care about most. I no longer carry the weight of their deception as a burden. Instead, it has become a lesson etched into my instincts. My life now moves forward independently, healthier and stronger than it ever was before. I focus on routines that nurture me: exercise, reading, evenings spent cooking meals I enjoy, quiet mornings where I sip coffee without tension hanging over me. Each choice, no matter how small, is a reminder that I am building a life that revolves around my well-being, not someone else's selfish desires. Jenna and Liam are left to grapple with the fallout. Mutual friends, family, and even casual acquaintances notice the change. Her apologies now feel hollow, his excuses impotent, because they see what they've lost in real time. They can no longer manipulate the narrative or diminish my experiences. The respect, love, and trust they once took for granted have evaporated, leaving them to face the consequences of their actions alone. I reflect often on boundaries, self-respect, and the quiet power that comes from walking away rather than staying to fight a battle that has already been lost. I've learned that true empowerment doesn't always come from confrontation. Sometimes it comes from removing yourself entirely and letting life unfold with integrity intact. As I sit on my balcony watching the sunset, the city bathed in gold, I feel a sense of closure unlike anything I've experienced before. The betrayal that once consumed me now exists only as a memory, a reminder of how far I've come. I am free, resilient, and fully in control of my future. And as the lights flicker on in the buildings around me, I know one thing for certain: justice, in its quietest and most profound form, has been served.